5.1. Welcome back, everyone. Let's dive into another critical area of the exam, controlling physical and logical access to assets. This is where we start connecting some of the dots between the various security concepts we've already discussed. And you'll notice there's a lot of overlap in terminology. Remember, this repetition is a good thing. It reinforces key principles that will help you on your CISSP exam. Today we're focusing on access to our assets, and both physically and logically. By assets, we mean not only the information and systems, but the devices, applications, and even physical facilities. The goal is to ensure that these are accessible, but only accessible to the right people, under the right conditions, at the right time. The CISSP exam will challenge your understanding of this in both theory and practical application. So we'll cover some best practices to ensure that you're prepared. As always, if there's anything I don't cover in enough depth, you know how to go deeper. Use the prompt at the end of this session and all of them. All right, let's move on. All right, this task has 6 subtasks: information, systems, devices, facilities, applications, and services. Each of these categories addresses a different type of asset that needs protection, and within each there are specific methods and technologies that can be used to control access. For example, when we talk about information, we'll be discussing concepts like encryption, data classification, and access auditing. Similarly, for systems, we'll talk about multi-factor authentication and network segmentation and so on for other categories. And remember, the exam will test your ability to understand not just individual terms, but how they fit together in a larger interconnected security strategy. 5.1.1 Information. This is all about how we control access to information, one of the most valuable assets aside from our humans that any organization holds. The exam places a lot of emphasis on these areas, so let's cover each point in a little detail here. Data classification. This is where we implement our schemes like public, internal, confidential, restricted, etc. The goal is to ensure that the right levels of access controls are applied based on the classification of the data. For the exam, you'll need to understand not only how to classify data, but also how to assign appropriate controls for each classification level. Next, we have role-based access control, or RBAC. This involves assigning access rights based on the roles within an organization. A key principle here is least privilege, ensuring that users only have access to the information necessary for their job function. The exam questions often explore this principle, so it's critical to understand how to apply RBAC effectively. Encryption and key management. Encryption protects sensitive information both at rest and in transit. However, managing the encryption keys is perhaps the hardest part. Strong key management systems ensure that only authorized individuals have access to the keys and therefore the encrypted data. Expect that the exam will test your understanding of encryption protocols and best practices for key management. Data loss prevention systems. DLP solutions help monitor, detect, and prevent unauthorized access, transmission, or exfiltration of sensitive data. This can involve monitoring emails, cloud services, or internal data transfers, web surfing. On the exam, you'll need to be familiar with how DLP solutions integrate into an overall security framework to minimize data breaches. Lastly, access auditing and monitoring. This involves implementing logging and monitoring systems to track who is accessing sensitive information and when. The goal is to detect any unusual access patterns that could indicate a security incident. On the exam, you may see questions around how to set up and maintain these auditing systems to ensure compliance and security. All these controls work together to form a robust strategy for protecting information, and you'll see many of these concepts reappear in different areas of the exam. Keep in mind, security is holistic, and these elements are interconnected. And again, if I didn't go deep, you know what to do. 5.1.2 Systems. Controlling access to systems is crucial to prevent unauthorized entry into your organization's core infrastructure. On the exam, you'll need to be familiar with a range of technologies and methods to secure system access. Let's break it down. MFA. It's about requiring users to require or provide two or more forms of verification before granting access. This could include something they know, something they have, and something they are or do. The exam frequently covers MFA as a critical component for reducing unauthorized system access. Privileged account management. Privileged users like system admins have access to the most sensitive parts of a system. PAM solutions help enforce the principle of least privilege by controlling, monitoring, and auditing their actions. This concept will come up in various exam questions related to controlling critical system access. Network segmentation and firewalls. Here we're talking about dividing the network into smaller parts and using firewalls to restrict access based on network location. Network segmentation is a powerful tool to reduce the impact of breaches and limit movements within a system. The exam may also ask about why segmentation is used to improve security. And lastly, secure remote access, whether it's through a VPN or some zero trust network access, ZTNA. Ensuring that network users can securely connect to the systems is vital, especially in today's environment where remote work is so common. You'll likely encounter questions on the exam about different secure remote access solutions and when they're most appropriate. These system-level access controls work together to secure the backbone of your organization's infrastructure, so understanding each one is crucial for the exam. And again, if something needs further clarification, our LLMs will know how to help you out there. 5.1.3 Devices. Controlling access to devices, whether they're mobile phones, laptops, or IoT devices, is another critical aspect of today's asset security. The CISSP exam will require you to understand both the technologies and the policies used to manage and secure devices. First up, mobile device management. MDM solutions allow organizations to enforce security policies on mobile devices. This includes the ability to remotely wipe data if the device is lost or stolen. For the exam, make sure you know how MDM fits into the broader security strategy, especially when it comes to protecting sensitive data on mobile devices. Next, network access control. NAC solutions authenticate and authorize devices before allowing them to connect to the network. This ensures that only compliant and authorized devices gain access. This concept might appear on the exam in questions about how to prevent unauthorized devices from joining the network. Biometric authentication. Using biometric methods like fingerprints or facial recognition adds a layer of security beyond traditional passwords. On the exam, you might be asked to compare the effectiveness of biometric authentication with other methods, particularly for high security environments. And finally, data encryption. Full disk encryption ensures that sensitive data stored on devices remains protected, even if the device is lost or stolen. For the exam, expect questions on encryption protocols and how device encryption fits into the overall data security practices. These device-level controls ensure that sensitive information on personal and organizational devices remains secure. As always, security concepts overlap. These controls work together within system and information controls to form a holistic approach to security. 5.1.4 Facilities. Physical security is just as important as logical access, and in some cases much more. On the exam, you'll need to understand how to control physical access to your organization's facilities. So let's go over some key components. First, physical access control systems. These systems use technologies like smart cards, biometrics, or PIN codes to restrict and monitor entry to facilities in sensitive areas. The exam will test your understanding of how these integrate with other security measures to ensure physical security. Next, visitor management. This involves tracking and controlling guest access, which includes processes like issuing visitor badges, escort requirements, and logging entry and exit times. On the exam, you may see questions on how visitor management plays a role in preventing unauthorized access to facilities. Video surveillance. Closed-circuit television systems are a common method to monitor entry points and in critical areas. Video footage serves as both a deterrent and a source of evidence if a security breach occurs. The exam could ask you about the importance of maintaining a comprehensive video surveillance system as part of physical security. And lastly, man-traps and multi-factor authentication for highly sensitive areas. Man-traps or interlocking door systems along with multi-factor authentication are essential for controlling access to highly secure areas like data centers. These techniques provide an extra layer of protection, and understanding when and where to use them will be key for the exam. Physical and logical access controls complement each other, ensuring that assets are protected from both cyber and physical intrusions. And if you want practice questions more around this topic, use the LLM at the end. 5.1.5 Applications. Securing applications is another critical component you'll encounter on the exam. And understanding how to manage access to applications is key. So let's go over some main points. Single sign-on. SSO allows users to access multiple applications with one set of credentials, streamlining user access while maintaining security. The exam may ask you about the benefits and risks of SSO, particularly how it reduces password fatigue, but can create a single point of failure. Next, multi-factor authentication. Well, it comes up again, but in the context of application access, MFA ensures that even if a user's credentials are compromised, there's still an additional layer of protection. Expect the exam to challenge your understanding of when and how to enforce MFA, especially for sensitive applications. ABAC, Attribute-Based Access Control, makes access decisions based on a combination of user attributes, resource attributes, environmental conditions. This allows you to more finely grain access control compared to traditional role-based models. You'll likely encounter questions about how ABAC can be applied in dynamic and complex environments, so be prepared to understand its use cases. API security. Oh, the hardest part I keep saying over and over here. Applications often communicate with each other through APIs, which is why securing APIs is critical. Robust authentication and authorization mechanisms should be applied to protect these interactions. The exam will likely include questions on how to secure APIs as part of application-level security. And lastly, continuous monitoring and adaptive access. This involves using user and entity behavior analytics, UEBA, to continuously monitor application usage and adjust access controls based on the risk. You might see questions on how continuous monitoring helps in detecting and preventing abnormal behavior, especially in high-risk scenarios. Securing applications requires a combination of access controls and continuous monitoring to ensure that only authorized users can interact with them. If you're unsure about how any of these concepts, practice them with your LLM assistant using the prompt at the end. 5.1.6 Services. Securing access to services is essential in today's interconnected environment. Again, this is where the APIs talk to each other. So with the rise of microservices and cloud-based architectures, the exam will test your understanding of how to manage and secure these services effectively. First, server mesh security. A server mesh architecture centralizes control over service-to-service communication. This allows for fine-grained access policies, encryption, and monitoring between services. On the exam, you may encounter questions about how service mesh improves security by simplifying management across distributed systems. Next, OAuth 2.0 and OpenID Connect. These protocols are used for secured delegation of authority and authentication. They are especially useful in service-oriented architectures such as microservices and APIs. Expect the exam to cover how these protocols secure interactions between services without sharing credentials. Zero trust network access. Zero trust principles are applied to service access, continuously verifying the identity and security posture of users and devices before granting access. This concept shows on multiple parts of the exam, and you'll need to understand ZTNA can reduce risk by eliminating the assumption of trust. And lastly, API gateways. API gateways centralize authentication, authorization, and access control for services. They act as a single point of enforcement for security policies. The exam may challenge your understanding of how API gateways fit into a service-based security model, especially for controlling service-to-service communications. All right, let's summarize 5.1, controlling physical and logical access to assets. We talked about how all the different controls are not isolated, right? They work together to form a holistic security framework, which is something the exam will expect you to understand. We talked about mastering concepts like MFA, role-based access control, and physical access control systems. We talked about data loss prevention systems and secure remote access. And finally, we talked about very important privileged access management and secure API communications. Remember, the security concepts overlap and reinforce each other, so the repetition we've seen is designed to help you retain information, which will be crucial for passing the exam. So come on, let's move on to the next slide and test it all out on our problem. All right, you know what to do. Modify this thing as needed. You should be able to edit this at this point. If I don't know, no, Larry, this is the first module I watched. But if you watched, at least domain, by domain 5, you should be pretty good at playing with this thing. And of course, if you need anything, let us know. We'll help you. Enjoy. See you next.